Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever felt like the world is just, I don't know, a little too loud, maybe a little too bright, or just totally overwhelming compared to how everyone else seems to experience it, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're taking a fascinating look at the concept of the high-resolution brain. We're going to explore this deeply validating perspective on how some minds are just wired to take in the world differently. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's explore what it truly means to experience life with sensory processing sensitivity.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine just for a second that your brain is a television screen. Now, while the vast majority of the population is walking around operating in standard definition, your brain, it's running on stunning, hyper-detailed 8K resolution. It's a pretty powerful metaphor, isn't it? And practically, what this means is that every single input gets processed at maximum priority. The subtle hum of the refrigerator in the next room, a tiny micro-expression of frustration on a coworker's face across the office, or even just the scratchy texture of a tag on the back of your shirt. Your 8K brain doesn't just notice these things in passing. No, it processes them deeply, intensely, and continuously. Here's the deal. Most people are walking around with a built-in spam filter for reality. Their brains just automatically sort through the noise, toss out the junk data, and only alert them to the really obvious, pressing stuff. But if you have an 8K brain, you literally don't have that filter. Every single piece of sensory data goes straight into your main inbox. If you constantly feel the sense of everyday sensory overload, well, this is why. It's not your imagination, and you definitely aren't overreacting. You're simply receiving a massive amount of data that others are entirely blind and deaf to. So psychologists actually have a specific scientific name for this experience: sensory processing sensitivity. And listen, it is a trait, not a flaw. If you have this, you've probably spent your whole life being told by well-meaning friends or family that you just need to toughen up or, grow a thicker skin. But evolutionary psychology tells a completely different story. This sensitivity isn't some glitch in your hardware. It isn't a weakness. It's actually a purposeful biological design. Your brain is functioning exactly as it was meant to. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this incredibly powerful quote. You are an orchid trying to grow on a concrete sidewalk. I absolutely love this because it perfectly captures the whole essence of sensory processing sensitivity. Think about it. An orchid is a highly complex, beautiful organism, but it needs a very specific environment to thrive. If it wilts on a sidewalk, we don't say the orchid is broken, right? We recognize the environment is wrong. Your mental processor isn't broken, it's just highly specialized. Section 1. Hunters versus sentries, the evolutionary revelation. To really understand this trait, we're going to travel way back in time, thousands of years back, into a dark, unpredictable prehistoric forest. In these early human tribes, survival was a daily, brutal challenge. And to survive, a tribe absolutely needed two distinct types of people who were completely interdependent: the hunters and the sentries. The hunters, they were the warriors. They went out and tracked game. And to do that effectively, they needed standard sensory processing. They had to focus narrowly on the target and just block out the rest of the world. But to sleep and recover, they relied entirely on the sentries. The sentries served a completely different but equally vital role. They were the tribe's early warning system. They operated with that 8K hyper-alert radar. So while the hunters slept or focused on the fire, the sentries were the ones processing every shift in the wind and every rustle in the bushes. And that, right there, was the sentry's specific evolutionary superpower: hearing the twig snap in the dark. Because their brains didn't filter out the small details, they were the ones who heard the danger long before the tiger could attack. They kept the tribe alive precisely because they were sensitive. Their sensory processing sensitivity wasn't a burden. It was literally the ultimate biological advantage that prevented the entire tribe from being wiped out in the middle of the night. Section 2. The evolutionary mismatch: concrete and digital noise. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. If being a sentry with an 8K brain is such a profound evolutionary advantage, why does it often feel like a debilitating curse today? Well, the core of the problem is a massive environmental shift. Thousands of years ago, your 8K brain was perfectly calibrated for the quiet subtlety of prehistoric forests and campfires. But today, you're surrounded by concrete, the relentless hum of fluorescent lights, constant smartphone notifications, sirens, and just endless digital noise. Here's the vital takeaway. Your environment has drastically changed, but your DNA hasn't. You still have the brain of a prehistoric sentry, but you are living in a modern sensory war zone. This is exactly what biologists call an evolutionary mismatch. Because of this mismatch, your sensitive 8K processor is running at 100% CPU usage all day long. It's constantly scanning for tigers in an environment where the tigers are now just loud traffic and aggressive emails. Meanwhile, the person sitting next to you with a standard definition brain, they're casually idling at like 20% CPU capacity. It is absolutely no wonder you feel completely exhausted by 3 p.m. You're processing 5 times the data with zero downtime. Section 3. Building your greenhouse protocols for survival.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our resolution phase. To survive the modern concrete jungle, you need high-value action protocols designed entirely to protect your sentry energy. It's time to stop trying to force yourself to blend into the concrete sidewalk and instead construct a protective greenhouse for your orchid brain. We're going to look at 2 protocols. First, the sensory diet, and second, the gray protocol. Protocol 1 is your sensory diet. This is all about controlling your inputs. First things first, you have to start treating noise-canceling headphones not as some luxury, but as essential PPE, personal protective equipment for your nervous system. Wear them proudly to block out the artificial noise. Secondly, you need to deliberately schedule what psychologists call restorative niches into your day. This means physically stepping away to spend just 10 minutes in absolute silence, ideally in a completely dark room. You literally have to give your 8K processor a dedicated chance to cool down so it doesn't overheat. Protocol 2? The gray protocol. Because, let's be real, what about when you can't escape? What about when you're stuck in a toxic, overwhelming, or chaotic modern environment, like a super loud open-plan office or a tense family gathering? That is when you deploy the gray protocol. This protocol dictates that in order to survive high-chaos environments without burning out, you must intentionally become boring. So the crucial point is this: you are a mirror, not a sponge. When the environment around you gets loud or emotionally chaotic, the modern sentry has to mirror back flat, unemotional responses. Give short, polite answers. Don't engage with the drama. Stop absorbing data, emotions, and stress that simply aren't yours to process. Conserve your bandwidth for the things that actually matter to you. Your brain is an incredible, highly evolved tool, capable of breathtaking depth and awareness. But it requires maintenance, right? It requires a greenhouse. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know you aren't broken and you understand the ancient, life-saving purpose of your 8K brain, how will you protect your sentry energy in a modern world? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a wonderful, empowering new way to look at how you process the world around you. Take care of that brilliant mind.